Hello, my name is Dr. Fraser Heritage. I'm a lecturer in linguistics in the Department of Languages, Information and Communications at Manchester Metropolitan University. In the last section of this lecture, we talked a little bit about some of the methods that you can use to explore representation across different forms of media, so really looking at patterns in the representation of different identities. In this section, I'm going to turn to talk about some case studies which have looked at patterns in representation. Before we can begin to talk about the representation of gender, I think it's worthwhile giving some definitions of what is meant by gender. Firstly, I should say that gender is a social construction that is different to sex. Gender is also not binary. As Judith Butler has written extensively, gender is something which we perform. The idea of performativity is not performativity like a play, but actually performativity stems from linguistics. And it's this idea that we construct reality as we speak. So for Butler, the idea of performativity is that we construct gendered realities as we speak, as we do, as we go about our daily lives. So just the very notion of, for example, putting on particular clothes or doing certain actions constructs gendered norms that we either align ourselves to or misalign ourselves to. And the idea here really is that gender isn't necessarily tied to sex, but is something that is socially constructed and we can kind of orient ourselves towards. No one is really born with gender. We don't have a particular part in our brain that says this regulates gender, but rather it is the idea that you become a gender over time, or you align yourself or identify with a gender over time. But when we say we look at things like the representation of women in the media or the representation of men, this can sometimes seem quite binary. And one of the things that we end up looking at is what we call fractals of the gender spectrum. So effectively what we do is we end up looking at these terms like man and woman as representative kind of snippets of broader ideas of masculinity and femininity. This isn't necessarily to say that these are the only two genders, but this is just to say that we only look at a small subset of gender quite often. I think it's now worthwhile turning to give some case studies of research which has looked at the representation of gender across different forms of media. So the first case study that I'm going to give you comes from Micheal Pearce's 2008 study, which looked at the representation of men and women in the written British National Corpus 1994. The British National Corpus is a collection of naturally occurring language collected in the years preceding 1994, so it's about a 4 or 5 year sampling frame. The written part of the British National Corpus is what Pearce was interested in using. So the British National Corpus has a spoken element and a written element, and the majority of the database is the written part. The British National Corpus is a multi-register database, so you've got text from all different genres and registers, so academic articles, newspapers, e-language, and so forth. So what Pearce did is he looked at the lemmas, man and woman, within this database. Now, a lemma is any form of a search term. So, for example, the word man as a lemma would include other terms such as men, men's, mans, and so forth. So what Pearce ended up finding is that the lemma man was statistically more likely to occur with words denoting strength and physicality. But as well, it would occur with things like active verbs. So men would be seen as doing really important tasks. Now this is important when we think about the sociological theory around masculinity. So what Pearce found is that newspapers kind of sustain these hegemonic masculine ideals, so what it means to be a good man, across several different texts. When Pearce compared this to the representation of women, what he found was that women were typically placed in grammatical constructions that placed them as the patients of verbs. So for example, they were pounced on, Pearce also found that there were a number of verbs around violence that women were the patients of. So they typically had violent verbs done upon them in different forms of reporting. And this is really important because there's an unbalanced representation of agency. So what we see is a lot of representations of men doing things, a lot of representations of women having bad things done to them. And that sustains problematic gender ideologies. Elsewhere, Paul Baker has used similar methods to look at the representation of gay men in the Daily Mail. Baker was interested in what's called discourse prosody, so the idea that different search terms might take on the semantic meaning of words that occur with it. So, for example, if we have a particular search term and we see that everything around that search term is negative, we would begin to associate that search term with negative things too. When we see words which occur with a similar semantic meaning, we build up this kind of bigger picture of the way in which we think that anything in that search term or what occurs with it should be, and these bigger sort of ideas that we call discourse. For his analysis, Baker collected two big databases called corpora. Both corpora were based around articles that contained either the words gay or homosexual from the Daily Mail. The first corpus contained data from the years 2001 to 2002, and the second from 2008 to 2009. The years are really important here because Section 28, the act which prohibited the promotion of homosexuality in schools, was decommissioned in 2003. So Baker was really interested in what effect this kind of getting rid of Section 28 had on media reporting of gay men. When we look at the kind of discourse prosodies of the data from 2001 to 2002, the terms gay and homosexual were much more likely to be associated with crime and violence. So, for example, Baker found that these terms were much more likely to occur or collocate with terms such as arrest, assault, convicted, crackdown, crime, guilty, illegal, and so forth. The Daily Mail represented gay people as promiscuous in 2001 and 2002, using words to occur with that such as saunas, debauchery, brothel, cottaging, etc. But Baker also found that being gay was represented as being shameful, so words such as allegation, closeted, denied, outed, private, and so forth were much more likely to occur with both gay and homosexual in 2001 than 2002. When we look at the 2008 and 2009 data from the same newspaper, gay people were still represented in relatively problematic ways, but slightly different ways. So, for example, we see a shift towards people being represented as shameless. So, gay and homosexual would occur with terms like flamboyant or extravagantly and so forth. And what this kind of suggests is it's nice to see some shamelessness in representation, but it still suggests that there is something to be shamed about. And so you still have some sort of problematic discourses there by implicature. We also begin to see that gay people are represented as having transient relationships in 2008 and 2009. So what we see is that these terms begin to occur with words like affair or casual and so forth. We also see a shift towards gay people being represented as politically militant. So these terms begin to occur with other words such as activist, agenda, and so forth. And so what Baker's research shows is that there are patterns across two comparable data sets within the same newspaper, and kind of shows that diachronic shift, so that shift across time in how an identity group is represented. Now, obviously some care needs to be taken with this kind of research. Baker looked at a relatively short period for diachronic change, 2001 to 2002, and then obviously 2008 to 2009 are relatively close to each other, and social change does take a long time. but it's really interesting to see how we can look at the representation of gay men across those data sets. And it shows you that we can take this kind of idea of discourse prosody, so the words that are occurring with what we're interested in, use that kind of statistical method of saying what is statistically likely to occur with it, and then semantically group them to see what these kind of broader ideas about that social group are. Now I want to move a little bit away from work in corpus linguistics, which has looked at representation, and I'm going to give you a case study that uses content analysis to look at the representation of gender. The next case study I'm going to talk about is Jeffery Brown's work on the representation of love, gender, sex, and superheroes. So, Brown is interested in the representation of gender, sex, sexuality, and the phallus in superhero comics and superhero-related media. So what Brown does is he takes a number of different comics and comic-related media and looks at things like the ways in which men, women, non-binary people, and so forth are represented within those texts, typically focusing on the visual elements. So, for example, Brown draws attention to how a number of comics don't actually ever show superheroes' penises, but they allude to it. And this is important for the construction of masculinity because a number of the ways that they allude to it are done humorously and to make it seem as though that superhero has a large penis. Importantly, one of the interesting findings from Brown's work is that by not showing the actual size of superheroes' penises, it creates this kind of illusion of their masculinity. So you see people's reactions to what are presumed to be large penises by superheroes, and it kind of adds to their perceived manhood. But they never actually show it, even in a lot of these sort of 18+ comics. And the idea behind that is that these repeated patterns kind of keep building up these pictures that it's assumed that big, strong, muscular superheroes will have large penises. But that might not necessarily be the case, and that can be used for comedic effect now and again. Think of things like the Thor films, where although you might see Thor from behind and see him naked, you never actually see his penis. And this really continues to contribute to the ways in which masculinity is constructed across superhero texts. Now, the last case study for this section that I'm going to give comes from Monica Miller and Alicia Summers' work, who looked at the representation of gender in texts about video games. Miller and Summer were interested in magazines about video games and video game characters within these magazines. They took a total of 49 articles from different magazines that spoke about video games, and there were 155 characters across these 49 articles. Similar to Brown, they did a visual content analysis across all of these, and what they found was that male characters were much more likely to be represented as strong and muscular and typically have weapons and be ready to fight, whereas the female characters in these video game articles were much more likely to be represented as supplementary characters. In terms of methodology, what we can see from Miller and Summers' article is that you can do good things like visual content analysis to explore how gendered characters are represented in texts about video games. Now, when we compare that to other literature, what we see is that some of those representations are also present in video games themselves. So in some of my personal research that I've published on the representation of gendered characters in video games, what I found is that similar discourses and similar representations of men being big, strong brutes and women being dressed as scantily clad and usually supplementary were also present in those video games. So a little bit like what we were talking about in the second part of this lecture, with how we can compare different results across different texts and different forms of research, we can also compare, for example, my findings from work actually looking in video games to Miller and Summers' work looking at work around video games to get a better understanding of the kind of discourses of representation and what is kind of acceptable for the representation of gender within that kind of sphere.